Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third in the series of LBS Conversation. This is LBS response, will I say a good corporate citizenship response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is the third in the series of these conversations. The first one was on organizational agility that took place last week. And then just yesterday, we had the webinar again on the risks African businesses are facing. Now today, we are on another very interesting one, which is COVID-19 and finance, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think we do not need to explain the reality everywhere in the world is facing at this material point in time. So it's very interesting time because for most of us alive today, this is the first time we are witnessing this kind of event, an episode where we are seeing our entire lives locked down. It is not a wartime situation, but it is even worse. So what does it mean for us? What does it mean for our finances? This is the time of anxiety everywhere in the world. No person is immune, no country is immune. We've seen assets crash. We've seen the financial fortunes of people just tumble all of a sudden. Nobody saw this coming. So it is something beyond us. Of course, it is because of the pandemic, but then it is leaving a trail of death and disruption and destruction on this path. What does that mean? What is good about it? What is bad? And what are the ugly things that we will be expecting or we are going through? And then how can we manage all of that? Now, to discuss this, we have a crack team of LBS distinguished professors. None of them needs any introduction, but you know, to comply with the protocol, I will need to introduce them. So I start with the lady among us. Mrs. Hajara Adeola is the Chief Executive Officer of Lotus Finance. Lotus is the Nigeria's only of the first Sharia compliant investment company in Nigeria. So we are happy to have her join us on this discussion. And then we have Mr. Bismarck Rewane. Mr. Bismarck does not need any introduction. Bismarck is the Chief Executive Officer of a financial derivatives company. He's also whom I would describe as the chief economist of the LBS Breakfast Club, which is a C-suite executive function for the top companies in Nigeria. He's also a member of the recently constituted Presidential Economic Advisory Council. We are happy to have him with us. Mr. Kayode is a faculty member in finance and strategy at the Lagos Business School. He's an award-winning lecturer. He has won the Best Teacher Award for several years and going. Every alumni of the Lagos Business School knows him very well. He's very competent in what he does. He's also a fellow of ICANN and among many other professional affiliations. He sits on the board of so many blue chip companies. And then I have Mr. Ikechukwu Kelikume. Kelikume is the HOD of the Department of Accounting, Finance, and Economics at the Lagos Business School. He's also, you know, an expert in agribusiness management. He has developed, will I say, the most popular agribusiness management program in Africa today, which is the Ag-MP, as we call it at Lagos Business School. He participated in designing that program, and he manages it for the Lagos Business School. We are glad to have Mr. Kelikume with us. And then we have Dr. Okenwuke. Okenwuke is a non-executive director of Access Bank. He's also the chairman of the Credit and Finance Board of Access Bank and also a member of the Risk Management Committee. He's a faculty member of Lagos Business School as well. So he comes with a whole lot of experience, industry experience, and classroom experience as well. And then we have, last but not the least, a professor of accounting of Lagos Business School, Professor Akintola Owolabi. Professor Owolabi is a veteran of the industry, a great teacher, and also a fellow of ICANN. So we have a collection of highly distinguished and accomplished fellows who come in with a lot of practical experience, not just academic theory. So they are here with us today to dissect what the pandemic meant for us, what it is, as far as finance is concerned, and then how do we manage our assets. Now, it is important for us to understand that in the times such as this, what is important is for us to know how best to protect the assets that we have. So how do we proceed? I have introduced my panelists, and then my name is Bongo Adi, by the way. I'm also a faculty member in economics at Lagos Business School. So as I have done the introduction, I will give each of them 5 minutes, starting with Bismarck, who will give us an overview of the macroeconomic events. So he will spend 5 minutes doing that. At the end of the 5 minutes, each of our panelists will take also 5 minutes to talk about different sectors of the economy that they have been pre-assigned. And then at the end of that, we will have 20 minutes for question and answers. And we hope we can address all of your questions today. Now, there are some housekeeping rules that we need to observe. All participants can only listen and post questions and comments. So you're not talking, of course, we can't hear you, so that's good. But I'm happy that you're hearing all of us. You post your questions in the question and answer section. Questions will be answered at the end of the discussion. We have 20 minutes for question and answers before we conclude. Note that this lasts just for 1 hour. We do not want to bore you. We want to make it as engaging as and interactive as possible. Other questions will be answered offline, of course, because we have limited time. We cannot take all the questions during this webinar, but rest assured that we will take care of all your questions and address them directly to you. Now, you can also vote on questions. Once you notice that the question you want to ask has already been asked, so you don't need to repeat it. You can just use the hand raised, and then also click on that so that we can know that you are voting for that question. So having introduced that, may we welcome Mr. Rewane to give us an overview of the macroeconomics and what it means for finance. Mr. Bismarck.
Good afternoon, Bongo, and good afternoon, everybody. I think before I start, since we have only 5 minutes, I want to use a minute to remind us of how we got here and why we are here. One is that this is the first time that we've used essentially biological warfare, right? We had military hardware warfare in the Second World War. We had the Korean War. We had the Kuwait War. We've also had cyber warfare, which we faced during the Brexit, the 2016 election in the United States, using cyber tactics. But then now we've seen what a fallout of what we can call at times contrived, at times not contrived biological warfare. Now, having said that, after war comes peace. And after war comes peace, and now let us analyze exactly where we are. What we are facing today is economic paralysis that has taken place during a war. But the world is not as coordinated as it was during the global crisis of 2008. Now we have a situation in which we are trying to coordinate this. And what are we doing? We have what we call an economically induced coma, causing economic paralysis, and then so that we can use that time to contain the medical and healthcare crisis that emanates out of this. Having done that, it is hoped that while we are saving lives, we will get to saving livelihoods after that. And this is our starting point. Now, how does it affect the global economy? The global economy itself is in economic paralysis. We are facing a situation in which we are definitely, everybody is going to be affected depending on what your share. Global trade, global investment, global aid, and global finance are all going to come screeching almost to a halt. How the buffers every country had, the amount of debt they had, the amount of aggregate consumer activity in that economy would drive what is going to happen following this. So where do we stand? In Nigeria, our GDP is about $420 billion, of which aggregate consumption, right, is about $324 billion. The other component is investment, which is about $88 billion. And we have government expenditure, which is about $24 billion. And then we have net exports. All of this come together to give you GDP. Now, what do we see going forward? In the next 12 months, you are going to see a contraction on GDP. Some have said 2.2%, some have said 4%. Dr. Adedipe went as far as saying about 30%. So we are taking an average of around 4 or 5%. If that is to happen, certain things will happen. The investment level will not reduce, but it will not increase. Government expenditure will increase, funded by a deficit. Consumption will reduce because in spite of the palliatives, aggregate consumption is going to shrink. And then net exports is going to go from about $23 billion to minus $4 billion. What this means for you is that sitting out there, if you are a corporate body, there's going to be a consolidation in almost every sector. Some sectors are going to win, some sectors are going to lose, but this is a tide that will not lift all boats. If you're a consumer, there's the Newton's law of gravity, which says that gravitational forces will bring you down. But there's also the Say's law, which says that every supply will create its own demand. So what you saw in the oil markets yesterday was where all the supply was coming in, but the supply did not create demand. And so that was a typical flaw in Say's law, that supply will create the demand, but the gravitational forces of bringing oil prices down took sway yesterday, and that is going to affect Nigeria. Now, where are the gaps? Nigeria does not have the buffers to withstand the shocks as we withstood it in 2008 and 2016. Our buffers are lean. We do not have the wherewithal, we do not have the productivity gains to lean on, and neither we have a management problem. However, Nigeria is using this opportunity to deal with both its operational problems, structural problems, and debt problems at the same time, simultaneously. How is it going to manifest itself? One, the price of petrol has been brought down to 123. It will probably go lower, creating some what I call the petroleum rebate of, at best, ₦500 billion for the whole year. We are also seeing palliatives of about 500 billion naira from the federal government, 500 billion naira from the federal government. We also have the central bank doing 3.5 trillion naira of palliatives. Is this going to go? It's not going to go. Mr.
Bismarck, you have 1 minute.
Okay, so let me round up. In conclusion, what you are going to see this year is negative growth, and it's going to stay like that until the middle of 2021 or early 2022. You are going to see corporate failures increase. There's going to be a corporate mortality. There's going to be consolidation in almost all sectors, including the banking sector. There's going to be exchange rate adjustments, significant exchange rate adjustment. And there's going to be, more than anything else, there's going to be a balance of fiscal shock, which will actually lead to higher unemployment in the short run. But eventually, there'll be a recovery that will start taking place in the second part of 2021 or early 2022.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Riwana, for that insightful expose of what COVID-19, the evil it has wrought on the global economy. So to put it succinctly, consumption will go down no matter what we do. Investment has dissipated already, and we can't help that. Government expenditure will increase because government is fighting to contain the pandemic and see how they can rejig life into the economy. And then of course, net exports will be in deficit, a huge deficit. And that has implication for the exchange rates. So high corporate mortality, many companies will not come out alive. Exchange rate adjustments, of course. And then fiscal shock that will create unemployment, massive unemployment. Even as we speak, people are already receiving their dismissal letters, even while they are home. And then the salaries have been slashed. And that is what it means for us. Now we're gonna break this down by sectors. So I would like to start first with Dr. Oke-Nwuke. I would like him to take us through again for 5 minutes through what this implies for manufacturing, for FMCGs, for the mining sector and oil and gas. Dr. Nwuke, please.
Thank you, Bongo. Good afternoon, all. Just like Mr. Iwane said, we're in for a long haul. It's a marathon in terms of the issue that we face. However, from the macro that he painted, it's clear that our job as corporates are cut out for us. If you look at what we have today, yes, it initially started as a medical issue, medical pandemic, mutated into economic crisis. Now, for Nigeria, it's a double shock, as he also mentioned. Today, we are not just talking about the pandemic. Oil prices have come down to the lowest in recent times. Now, the impact for corporates, even though I'm not going to bunch all of them at once, but generally, the impact of corporates will not be positive. What we're going to see today is that most of the corporates will be suffering from FX liquidity, with exchange rates, with exchange earnings down on oil and gas, crude oil prices. I mean, from $60 over to down to almost under 20 today. The earnings of Nigeria in terms of foreign exchange liquidity is down significantly. So most corporates are going to suffer the challenge of sourcing liquidity, foreign currency, to do their transactions, or even to meet the existing obligation they have on their balance sheets. Some of them also, whether you also mentioned adjustment in recent CBN adjustment in exchange rate, whether you call it adjustment or devaluation. The implication is going to be burdensome on corporates. Now, we'll talk about most of them are going to suffer, are already suffering from dislocation in their supply chain, coming from China, where most of them source their inputs. Even in Nigeria, locally, before the government, these ports have been congested. It takes a month and over to get, ship to pay it and they get goods out of the port. So basically, also alluded to the fact that they're going to have a consumption decline. People are suffering from, disposable income shortages. So people are going to be prioritizing what they consume. So, and factories are also short, even as we speak today. So that's compounding their challenges. I must mention, however, that even before this crisis, some sectors in the corporates have been in recession. Some are just trying to come out of recession. So the crisis is almost like having a relapse. You're coming out of malaria and then have a stroke. So it's really looking very difficult for corporates. Now, but as to how it affects the individual corporate, it's a function of a few things. The ability to grow sales, generally sales is going to be down as the economy contracts, as Mr. Iwane mentioned. But some may have different levels of ability to grow sales. The food industry, etc., are going to have a positive impact. Now, again, it will also depend on your situation as a corporate or the sector. Are you a price taker or a price giver? The length of operating cycle, the longer the cycle, the more difficult it's going to be for corporates because they have a lot more money tied in the cycle. Now, we are going to have challenges collecting sales revenue, realizing them as cash. A whole lot of customers, their credit worthiness are going to weaken. So that will impact on corporates. It will also depend on ability to maintain operating margins. As costs are going up, are you able to pass those cost increases to consumers at times like this? So those are also going to be impactful on corporates. Now, coming down, I've talked about the issue of liquidity, finding dollars to import your goods. Most of the manufacturers in Nigeria today, a significant portion of their inputs, raw materials, are imported. So now we have a dual issue of not finding liquidity to even meet the existing LC obligations, because that's the issue today. Then banks are not going to be opening LC for a lot of corporates today. So it compounds the challenges. And then even when we're able to do that, devaluation of the Naira means they're going to shell out a lot more Naira to get the same volume of FX. So now, where does that take us to in terms of the individual corporates? A whole lot of analysts have put all these factors together and come up with some general positioning as to where some of them will fit. Now, if you look at the oil and gas sector, I'm breaking them down into the component sectors. The upstream IOC, international oil companies, we have a moderate impact. They have strong balance sheet. They're not highly leveraged generally, and they have liquidity to meet whatever obligation they have. Now, the oil and gas downstream, because they generally buy, it's still a regulated market. They buy product from NNPC and sell. Most of them don't import products, so little or no impact. So the oil and gas services, because of the significant drop in oil price, there are no more interest for a whole lot of for exploration and production. So they're going to feel the impact. So they're going to be highly impacted. That's services. Now, if you come down to indigenous oil and gas upstream companies, they're in really, really big bad shape. Why do I say so? most of them acquired themselves from the IOCs at the peak price of oil price. And that means the valuation were so very high when they bought this asset, the OMLs, most of them. So now they require a whole lot of FX liquidity. Oil price is down.
Okay, Dr. Nwuke, you have just a minute. So
yeah,
wrap
I'll
up.
round it up.
Thanks.
Okay, now, so basically what we are talking today is what will be the response of most corporates. So we have a crisis. All we need to do, a whole lot of CFOs will not be sleeping today. They are going to be trying to do scenario analysis to know where you are, how bad the things are from a revenue standpoint, expense, etc. Determine which expenses can be done away with. And then, of course, must have very good relationship with the bankers because this is not the time to run out of credit. If I still have more time, I'll tell you clearly that a whole lot of people are going to be working on reducing the working capital cycle because that's where cash is tied. Whether we are able to do that will also depend on their situation. Now, some corporates is not as bad as I've painted, but truly we have a very difficult situation that requires very ingenious and innovative solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Nwuke. I hope that you give us some of those ingenious and innovative solutions. Yeah, the takeaway from there is that we've had that many times over, that the Nigerian corporate situation, corporate environment is like someone having malaria, and then as the person was recovering, the person gets a stroke. So that's actually the way to summarize the situation. Now, Hajara, you are an investment banker, so Lotus Capital. Let us know, what does this imply for finance and insurance subsector?
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar. First, I'd like to just extend my well wishes to everybody. I hope you're all safe and well, and I commiserate with those who are suffering either health or economic challenges. This is really an unprecedented challenge. And like the two previous speakers have said, the interesting thing about it is that it's happening to everybody at the same time. And whilst that presents many risks, it also presents some opportunities. When I was thinking about this, I think the only thing that is, there's no single story in any sector, but the one thing that is constant is uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, then we have to build our buffers. Mr. Ariole was talking about the reserves of the country going down. And when I was reflecting, I said, the reserves is necessary at the national level, but it's also necessary on the corporate level and on the individual level. So this is the time to have cash. And this is the time to extend your runway. For any startup company, they'll understand what we mean by runway. They're usually not making income or revenue initially, and they're burning cash. So they're asking themselves, what is their runway? How many months can I survive if my income is not exceeding my costs? And it's a simple calculation. If my revenue minus my costs is, say, negative 1 million naira a month, and I have 10 million naira in the bank, then I know that I can survive for 10 months at my current level of operations. And I think the job of every company now is to extend that runway and extend that cash buffer. And there are several ways of doing that. I think the first way is what every household knows. That's just trimming the fat, cutting costs, going lean, deferring any expense that is not necessary. Our government did it with our budget, and we have to do it with our corporates as well. The second way is to increase your revenues. Now, that's where there's no single story. Some companies are able to, this is the bumper season for them. And some other sectors, this is a very lean season. But this is where our creativity and our innovation comes in. You may need to pivot. You may need to go into joint ventures. You may need to look at what is needed and see what assets you have, whether physical or intellectual, that you can apply into another stream of income that will assist you to survive. And if you cannot increase revenues, then you can increase your audience. The kind of thing that LBS is doing today is increasing its audience. You're extending services and creating, expanding your brand and creating business for the future when things return to normal. And the last one, which is also very, very important, is to just raise your cash. Mr. Nwuke was just talking about, this is not a time to lose your credit lines. So stay close to your lenders, engage with them early. Don't wait until you need them before you start engaging with them. The government and the CBN have already put some palliatives in place. CBN has given forbearance to the deposit money banks to restructure loans for companies. Nobody is in a good, the reason I said the benefit of this happening to the whole world at the same time is that everybody realizes that unless the individual, unless the corporate is healthy, financially, everybody is in trouble. So everybody is motivated to ensure the success of everybody else's business. The last thing the banks want is a bad credit portfolio and non-performing loans. So if they see good, well-run businesses, they're going to extend themselves to assist you to survive. The other way, of course, there are lots of intervention funds. CBN has announced an intervention funds. It's also announced a moratorium on some of its loans and reduction in the cost of some of its loans. There are also SME loans are available, people like BOI and bank loans. And then there's always equity. For some companies, this is the time where they may have to raise more money. But the summary of what I'm saying is that this is the time to really extend your buffers, build up your reserves, and in the words of Joseph's Egypt, get ready for the 7 lean years. Tighten your belt, increase your stores, and if you were eating 3 times a day before, it's time to eat twice a day or once a day, and let your money stretch for as long as possible. The one thing I'll say is that this time is definitely going to pass, and when it does, it's those who are left standing who will have a chance to recover and to benefit from the rebound, because this recession or this economic calamity is not caused by people not wanting to buy, it's their inability to buy. It's not by people not wanting to travel, it's the inability to travel and so on. So as soon as this is over, there's going to be much more of a sharp rebound that you would have than you would have in a normal recession environment. A few of the other things that I think are interesting to talk about in terms of extending the cash cycle is that we have some interesting and I think positive news.
Okay, Hajara, you have a minute.
Okay. The House of Reps has passed the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill, reducing the payee for companies by 50% if they keep their staff employed till the end of the year. Federal Inland Revenue Service has extended the filing for VAT and withholding tax by 10 days in the month. Lagos State Internal Inland Revenue Service has also extended the filing deadline for individual and self-employed by 2 months to the end of May. And these can all help to extend the runway or the cash buffer for people. I'd like to say, I'd just like to conclude by saying, Helen Keller said, the world is filled with suffering, but it's also filled with people overcoming suffering. This will pass. And Nigerians may be weak economically and infrastructurally, but we're very strong, we're very resilient, we're very creative and we're innovative. And where there's life, there's hope. So the most important thing is to keep our health so that when, as we have the strength and the ability to overcome these challenges, which I'm sure we will.
Thank you very much, Hajara. Another insightful presentation. Again, these two shall pass. I think that is some consolation for us. Okay, so the next will be Mr. Ikechukwu Kelikume, Agriculture, Construction, Real Estate, and of course, education if he has time for that. So Mr. Kelikume, you've been very active in the agribusiness space. So last time we had a recession, agriculture didn't go into recession. So shall we see a repeat of that? Wouldn't agriculture go into recession? Shall we continue to eat? You need to unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself. Thank you. You are still muted? Okay, great. We can hear you now.
Okay. Bongo, thank you very much. And thanks to the other speakers. I'm going to approach this by looking at it from the topic per se, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like Bismarck and Oke said, COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted virtually every sector of the Nigerian economy. The last time we had a recession, it actually did not affect the agricultural sector. But the dynamics has changed. We all know that today there's a sit at home across different states. So farmers include, and agriculture follows a particular cycle. So if farmers are not farming, if farmers are sitting at home, there's likely to be no food at this particular time. So there's a problem. So I'm going to approach it from the good. The good is that without food, there will be no nation. Without education, we're also going to be bankrupt. Without real estate, we will have no place to hide our head. So education, agriculture, housing, all form part of the basic need of man. So the good part of it is that food demand is generally inelastic, and its effect on the overall consumption during crisis period is actually limited. So this is one of the reasons why farmers and those engaged in the agribusiness space are actually going to be smiling at this time, because prices have actually gone up and people must feed. And because they must feed, the agricultural sector is one of the least exposed sector. However, the bad part of it is that agriculture in Nigeria is almost 90%.
Looks like we are losing Mr.
We are gradually approaching May. We are gradually approaching the month of May, and the rains are yet to come down, which means that farming or farmers generally, even though some of them are at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Nigerian agricultural system is largely raised to create a large effect on the economy. Again, the current lockdown has created another major problem, disrupting logistics. You can see that the has risen between 1,500 and 2,000 naira. And all of this is basically as a result of what? Logistics, the current logistics bottleneck across country. Also the fear factor.
We have lost you again. If you can hear me, Mr. Kelikume, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to call on the next speaker so we can have you when your network improves. So I'm going to give you an opportunity in the next, say, 5 or 10 minutes. So let's have Professor Owolabi. He's going to speak to us on corporate cost management while Mr. Kelikume, works on the network. Well, it's not his problem. These are some of the exogenous problems that we have to endure. So we're sorry for that. We will get back to him so that he can continue to give us the insight on agriculture, agribusiness, construction, and the real sector. Thank you very much. So, Professor Owolabi.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for this very brilliant get-together in terms of trying to provide solutions to the problems we have. I am going to be a little bit different from what most of the speakers have spoken in terms of providing solutions that are essentially economic.
Prof, we're losing you again. Okay, you're back.
Providing solutions into a problem that is not too much economic problem, but using economic solutions. And the food for thought is to perhaps going back to the drawing board and try to have a better integrative approach in the way we think, in the way we
another interruption. We're having challenges. I think Professor Owolabi is having network disruption. Okay, so
the way we think, the way we manage and the way we strategize. Okay. If we continuously ignore the environment, the social issues, the governance issues, and continually contribute to the distortion in the ecosystem, COVID-19 is not going to be the only exception. Now, having said that, my approach and from the discussions we had in the last two webinars, one thing is certain, that tomorrow is not going to be as yesterday and the day before. The DG of NCDC made that very clear, that we shouldn't deceive ourselves, that even after the lockdown is lifted and we go back, it's only business as usual. Therefore, in summary of my take, we must try to connect our strategy with our cost management. Strategy and cost management, they are not disconnected. Any organization that does that is not going to be sustainable. And therefore, what are the ingredients of connecting your strategy with your cost management? Number one, you must rethink the classification of your cost from the norm into capabilities. You will have to identify among the functional classifications and try to enhance rethink costs in terms of capabilities, make your cost management plan sustainable. Try to do what is called zero basing, which means going back to the drawing board, list all your costs and ask yourself the very bitter questions as to, out of these listed costs, which ones are actually in support of my strategy and which ones are dead wood that you are just trying to continually
Prof, we
also,
okay, back.
Also, you must be proactive, and let us have it in our DNA that we should create a continuous cost management mindset. Continuous cost management mindset. But in summary, if you only concentrate on economic costs and disregard the social and the environmental and the governance, there could be a possible repeat of COVID-19 tomorrow, maybe in another shape. It could be a manifestation of the neglect to the global warming or the population.
Okay, Prof. We've had a lot of interruptions coming from your side, and that means that your presentation has been a little bit lax. We couldn't put it together, but I'm going to give you opportunity again. So hoping that by then the network shall improve. So let's have Mr. Kayode Omerege to give us his perspective on both corporate and personal finance, tourism, and SMEs. Kayode, like I said, sits on the board of so many blue chip companies and is also a fellow of ICANN. Please, Mr. Omerege.
Well, thank you very much, Bongo. Most of the things that need to be said have already been said by my colleagues here. Permit me to share some slides here that will drive this conversation. I'd like to start by saying, look, the sky will fall, but it is not on the head of any one person. It will fall on all our heads. The difference is that it will fall on the heads of the taller ones first. The point is that this COVID-19 is really a health pandemic, a health issue that has morphed into an economic challenge is affecting all of us. But research and experience has shown to us that the impact, the financial impact, will vary in scope, in focal point, and in intensity across geographies and within geographies, and across industries and within industries. And that's what we see here. I mean, the last financial crisis, as you rightly mentioned, and as Philippe mentioned, the one resilient sector was the agri sector. The point is that the impact of these things will vary, but also vary within sectors. Because during the last financial crisis that we had, we noticed that some industrial companies within certain industries, for example, banking sector, were able to weather the storm better than others, which therefore implies that not only is the structured prior to COVID, and the way managers respond to COVID will impact, how their financials are affected and how they can get themselves out of it. So how does this whole thing come together? Well, we'll find out that the very first impact of this pandemic is on demand and then on revenue. There's going to be a drastic jump in demand and revenue for some time to come. How long, nobody knows. We hope that we get through or get a medical solution to the COVID thing so that this social distancing issues can be worn down. If that is not the case, we'll see a protracted slowdown in demand and revenue that will cause escalation, especially for entities with high operating and financial leverage. And then that we will see margin shrinkages. And when all this happens, cash flows and liquidity is stressed. Now, when cash flows and liquidity is stressed, this itself can be exacerbated by an expansion in the operating cycle of the business. What do we mean? The rate at which companies are able to convert their raw materials to finished goods, sell them, collect their monies from those who are there. If this continues to stretch as it will continue to put severe stress on cash flows and liquidity. Now, we should bear in mind that cash flows have three key dimensions. There's a timing dimension to cash flow. There's also a magnitude dimension, and there's a volatility dimension. All of this affects risk and cost of funds. And so what we expect to see is that the cost of capital of businesses will rise at this time, and it's a time when the nominal returns from assets have gone down. So two things will be hitting us. Our cost of capital as businesses will go up. Our returns on assets will come down. What that does is that it shrinks our economic profit. It shrinks the capacity of business to deliver value to shareholders. And while that is the case, we find out that return spread is low, and we begin to shortchange our investors. And that will not be good for companies. On a personal level, we'll find out that the earning power of a lot of people is beginning to shrink right now. One, a lot of people are losing their jobs. People are not going to work. Our economy is populated substantially by people who earn their income on a daily basis. They're not being able to go out to work means that they're not earning. For those who even have a job, there are recession going on right now. There are staff layoffs going on right now. For those who have not been laid off, in some organizations, salaries have been slashed down. In some cases, salaries have been deferred, which simply means that the liquidity of even the household is stressed as we speak right now. Now, we're going to talk about how we will deal with all of this. For those of us who have investment portfolios right now, the stock market is down. There are very few investment opportunities out there. But like Ajay did say, the primary concern of most investors right now is to be risk averse and to try to ensure you have, try to time capital markets. If you're an investor for the long term, now is a good time to get into the stocks, These funds to show up the liquidity. Companies like Dangote usually recently tried to use, which are issuing commercial papers. These are good investments to put your money in on a personal basis. But remember that you also need to have some liquidity in your hand. Now, what are the ugly sides of these things? Well, the truth of the matter is that as we have demonstrated, the impact will vary across industries. Research tells us clearly that the way a company is configured, the way a company's managers react to situations can either worsen or ameliorate a bad situation. With specific reference to some industries, there's very little they can do. Tourism, hospitality, travel, aviation, hotels, entertainment, nightclubs, theaters, all of this will be severely impacted as we speak right now. This morning I had the news that Virgin Air Australia has gone into administration because it's unable to meet its debt obligations, and was not able to get some bailout from government. This is going to happen for a lot of businesses going forward globally and locally too. Occupancy rates of hotels have gone down, resorts are shutting down, people are not going to nightclubs, and so on and so forth. One bright spark here is, even though there's some security challenges, private security firms are doing good business as we speak today. Bottom line is that businesses will fail. Some businesses will fail. That's just the bottom line. Some will be so weakened that after the COVID issue, they will need massive restructuring. One thing we found from research is that the capacity of
can you conclude in a minute? Thank you.
Yes, the ability of companies to weather this storm is also a function of the insolvency regimes that we have in place. With specific emphasis on SMEs, SMEs will be impacted in the same way that the industries in which they situate themselves are impacted. But the issues with SMEs that it will be worsened by the peculiarities of SMEs. SMEs generally have costs due to the absence of economies of scale. They have thin capitalization. They usually have a high level of leverage. They have poor management. They have lack of financial flexibility. And effectively, then they will be adversely impacted by this problem. On the good side, of course, there's a retail boom right now. Those industry sectors that are in the food, essentials, pharmaceuticals, and all that will be doing well. There's an opportunity for rebirth. So post-COVID, it's time for business to look at themselves from a strategic perspective and see how they can restructure a business such that they are flexible and able to withstand these kind of scenarios when they do come. And let's face it, these kind of things will still occur in the near future. Thank you, Bongo, for now.
All right, thank you very much, Kayode. Thanks, that was a very insightful comment from Kayode Omerege. Okay, the last lap before I return to Professor Wolabi and Ikechukwu Kelikume because of the loss of network when they were presenting. So let's listen to Bismarck once again on the financial services and investment climate, and of course, e-commerce. Mr. Arwane, please.
Yeah, okay, I think when I was winding up, what I didn't mention was the level of national and corporate debt. I think, oh, wow. Sorry. Okay, the level of corporate and national debt. I think that what is happening now is that Nigeria's debt level as a percentage of GDP and its debt level as a percentage of its revenue shows that there is a debt crisis building, because we need to, and the use of the debt is not necessary for investment, it's used for consumption at this time. So there is that debt which could crystallize. 1, 2, the level of corporate debt, because if you are borrowing 385 million naira to buy $1 million, and you now have to start borrowing 420 million naira to buy $1 million this quarter, there's already a gap there. The interest rate environment in which we're operating, the assumption that interest rates are going to be at 5 or 3 or 2% is a false assumption. The reality is that Nigeria's federal government of Nigeria's debt domiciled in the Central Bank of Nigeria is anything between 6 and 9 trillion naira, which is far in excess of what the Central Bank Act or the Fiscal Responsibility Act allows. Therefore, we expect that there will be a consolidation of Nigerian debt and new instruments will be issued. And if these new instruments are issued by way of treasury bills and Nigerian treasury bills, then you can imagine what's going to happen to the interest rate environment. An interest rate environment in which interest rates are 3-4% when inflation is edging towards 13, and the projected inflation for the end of the year is 19 for that matter. So you need to understand that you are going to be borrowing at a higher rate of interest. You are going to have an exchange rate adjustment, which is inevitable, and a mechanism, where it's not just a one-off adjustment. You are going to have trigger points. I think there are 5 indicators that will give you what these measures are going to be, which will revalue or devalue or adjust the exchange rate and put it on the real effective exchange rate path. So I want corporates to understand this. 1, the level of debt you have, you need to arrange for a higher level of debt because of the translation effect of the currency adjustment. Secondly, the interest rate environment in which you're operating is going to change dramatically. Thirdly, you are going to have to compete for consumer loyalty, because consumer income, as consumer income shrinks, they're going to be doing two things. They're going to be adjusting to price and adjusting to income. So your share of this is going to be addressed. Finally, the e-commerce as a substitute for day-to-day commerce. People are, as you can see, we are here discussing online, and everybody, we have over 2,400 participants, all of them at home. We've now seen the efficiency that comes from using the online medium and platforms to communicate. We are not going to go back to the former inefficient ways. There will be personal interaction, but it will be much less, and this will be more impactful. So we are going to have a consumer who is more discerning, a consumer who has less money, a consumer who is going to be responding to price elasticity and income elasticity at the same time. We are going to be looking at corporates who are borrowing more. We are going to be dealing with exchange rate and interest rate adjustments at the same time. And we are going to be dealing with subsidies removed in the petroleum products. These are the challenges. The opportunities are those who are efficient, those who can position themselves so that their marginal cost is actually declining, right? And managing the average cost will come out thriving, while a few, like we said, there are a few people that are just going to go to the wall. You've heard Richard Branson. We've heard Neiman Marcus yesterday went into liquidation as well. And that is one of the super iconic brands in the US. And everybody who knows Neiman Marcus knows that if Neiman Marcus goes to the wall, Virgin Atlantic goes to the wall, Virgin Australia goes to the wall, there are many more going to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bismarck. Now, the last 5 minutes, I would like to hear again to round up Mr. Kedikume's presentation. And of course, I want to visit Professor Owolabi so that they can round up their presentation before we open for the questions. We have so many questions. Right now, we have over a 250,000 attendees to this webinar. That's highly encouraging. So people tuning in from all parts of the globe. So we have actually 2,465 people in the audience, for this webinar. That's impressive. Then the questions, we have more than 211 questions. So of course, it's obvious that we cannot do justice to all of these questions. We do not have the time. And then, like I promised you in the beginning, we will take time to address all these questions. A lot of people have been asking if they will get the summary slide and of the presentation at the end of the day. Yes, you will. So at the end of the day, we'll put this into a very coherent piece, a very nice narrative, looking at what is good, where the opportunities, breaking it down by sectors, and then that will be shared to all that participated on this webinar today. So right now we have 2,475 people. So back to Mr. Kedikume again. A lot of questions people are asking about agriculture. All right, so please, I will want you to highlight that again.
So I'm going to look at it quickly regarding what Kayode shared, because Kayode shared the agric dynamics. Now, the agricultural sector is so unique that it's basically structured into 4 sectors. Now, you have crop production taking about 92% of the agric sector GDP, whilst livestock, forestry, and fishery takes the remaining 8%. So what that tells us is that you just have one sector doing about 92%, and that sector is related to the upstream sector, which is basically farming. And one of the things we find with COVID-19 is that people are restricted, the rains are not yet here, export is also constrained currently. So the dynamics that we saw in the previous recession, where agric actually held its own, we're not likely to see that in this dispensation, because it is so difficult to export agric product today because countries are generally shutting their borders export. So what we're going to find is more of post-harvest losses. We're beginning to see that happen with the poultry value chain, where eggs are being buried because you cannot take them to the market. The markets are shut down. So the ugly part of it is that we cannot sell our products abroad. And if we cannot sell our products abroad, the new opening for this sector is that we need to now go back and look at the processing. How do we begin to process the crops that we produce in Nigeria in such a way that we can consume and sell to the over 200 million Nigerians. So that's the scenario we currently find with the agricultural sector today. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So back to Professor Owolabi so that we can conclude. Prof, are you still with us? Okay, well, it seems Prof is still having some network challenges. Now let's go to the questions. We've got about 233 questions. Of course, we cannot do justice to all of this. So I will start with a particular question that was addressed to, to Mr. Bismarck.
Hello, Bongo.
Yes.
Prof is back.
Prof, are you back? Okay, Prof, can we have you now, please?
Yes. The summary of what I was trying to say is that we would not be sustainable if we limit our thinking only to economic considerations. And that consideration should also be on the environment, the sociological environment, governance, and also political economy. But I try to send 2 slides which kind of summarizes the way forward in terms of management of costs, that we should not have a disconnection between our strategy and cost management. That's very important. And also that we should have a continuous cost management mindset. More importantly, management should list out all the costs. This is very available in all the documents they have, and try to do a zero basing, which
Okay, Prof, we've lost you again. So I think what will happen is that you have 2 slides. If you can share that with us. Okay, you back? Prof, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I've sent it to you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to share it here so we can all look at it. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you can share your screen so we can look at it, right away.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, great.
Okay, so.
Screen share. 2 slides.
Okay, while you're managing to do that, now I'll go to Bismarck with the first question. Somebody asks to Bismarck.
I think I'm on.
Okay, you're on?
Yes, I am on.
Yes.
You're waiting for your slide. If you share it, we'll see it on the screen. Okay, Prof, we will allow you to deal with that. Let's get to Bismarck. So Bismarck asked, somebody asked him a question. Being a member of the Economic Advisory Council, you indicated that there will be an exchange rate adjustment or currency devaluation. Given what we know about this government, they seem to be averse to this as a policy response. How then do you think this will come to be? Do you see the political will to do it, or they will continue to wait and struggle with the reality until the situation is forced on us, by which time it may be too late and the impact could become more severe? If government would be willing to devalue the Naira, around what time would you advise them to do this? This question is from Mr. Femi Akintude, and it's for you, Bismarck.
First and foremost, the work of the Advisory Council is done in camera, and what I'm sharing with you are my own personal views. My assumption that there will be an adjustment, which is inevitable, is based on the fact that our main source of revenue is oil. And if the price of oil has crashed as much as 60 or 70%, it's only natural that an adjustment will take place. How this adjustment is going to take place is left for the monetary policy authorities, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria, to manage. 1. 2, I'm also envisaging that because we have approached the multilateral agencies for support, i.e. the World Bank, the IMF, and the African Development Bank, one of the conditions for this is that you should adopt a much more market-oriented formula for managing your exchange rate to bring consistency between the external and the domestic sectors of the economy. I think that, as far as I know, is, okay, now you can say. Now, I think that what we are going to be seeing is periodic adjustment based on the realities. In other words, the currency could appreciate when oil prices improve and our export competitive position improves, and it could depreciate when our terms of trade. Why do I say that an exchange rate adjustment or an adjustment to the pricing of our currency is inevitable? Because of 5 things. 1, the balance of trade is negative. It's going from 23.9 billion positive to minus 4 billion negative. In terms of trade, which is the price of our export relative to our imports, our exports have dropped by about 70%. Our import prices have actually dropped by only about 20%. Thirdly, our current account is in deficit. We are making more payments on invisibles than we are receiving proceeds. Fourthly, because of the fiscal shock and the fact that we have debt service burden to deal with, and more than anything else, because of the pandemic, the fact that we depend on diaspora remittances, it is possible that 22 million people have filed for unemployment in the United States at this point. The same thing is going to happen in the UK, the same thing is going to happen in Germany, and it is possible, and I think almost inevitable, that Nigerians will be part of these forces that will be laid off. If our people are laid off, our diaspora remittances will also drop. So we are going to lose money inflows from diaspora. We are going to have a current account deficit. We are going to have balance of trade negative. In terms of trade are negative, and the price of oil is bringing us down. With all of this, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that there will be an adjustment. The mechanism, the adjustment of the exchange rate is not the same thing as adopting a mechanism to have to have consistency on an ongoing basis. I think what the Nigerian government will probably decide to do is 1, an adjustment, 2, and to adopt a mechanism. When those 2 things happen at the same time, you'll find that that volatility of your exchange rate, which has actually inhibited investment, is going to be removed, and the new investment that will come will be a platform for growth to take place, a catalyst for growth.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bismarck. We promised you 1 hour, and we have actually exceeded by a minute. But because of the volume of questions that we've received, 257 questions, and there's no way we can answer them here. So we are going to address all your questions, no doubt, and then we will summarize this presentation today and send it to you all. So you will please agree with me that we spent the 1 hour, but I want to address some few more questions. Now, there is a question that people are asking about telecommunication going into negative, according to the slide shared to us by Mr. Kayode Omerege. Now, what I have to say to that is, we don't have the most recent data. Data has not been updated. So the data we have definitely is pre-COVID. So nobody has actually gotten any data right now on the economy. So yes, we need to update that. If you watch how things have been going on, especially with respect to demand for internet access, broadband connectivity, and all of that data at home, because people are now working from home, like this webinar that we're having over Zoom. So it is making huge demand on that infrastructure. So yes, you may expect that the telecommunication would have increased during this period. So we should understand that we don't have updated data yet. So I think that has taken care of that question. Now there is another question that was addressed to Mr. Kelikume by Theo Wankwo. He said Kelikume sort of mentioned that the agri sector seems to be more resilient. If government was to inject funds into the economy to revive the economy, what sectors should the government prioritize? I think this question goes to every member of the panel, including my humble self. So if government were to inject funds for the recovery of the economy, which sectors do you think will have the maximum impact? Which sectors do we think has what you call the multiplier impact? So I'll start with Mr. Kelikume. Please unmute yourself first.
Okay. I think the agricultural sector will have a significant multiplier effect on the economy because we're looking at the linkage between the agricultural sector and the service sector and the manufacturing sector. It is actually linked to virtually all sectors. But the challenge today is that most of the hotels are shut down. Most of the eateries are shut down. Most of the agri product cannot be exported currently. So you have a scenario where you're actually producing and not exporting. We also have a challenge in terms of processing and storage. So if you produce and you don't store, it will decay. So your post-harvest losses will increase. So I think in investing in this sector, we must look at the service sector and the agri sector, whereby you begin to look at storage, at processing, at logistics, and begin to fine-tune that sector, where you begin to take raw materials and process them into packaged product for the Nigerian economy. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so second to the last question that we will take. Are there investment opportunities in the capital market post-COVID? If yes, which industry should be the focus? I think Okenwuke can help us with this. Which industries do you think should be focused for those who want opportunities in the capital market? What should they be looking at post-COVID?
I think every crisis, like you said, as all of us are, bemoaning our fate today as corporates, a whole lot of people are waiting. There's what they call vulture investing. A whole lot of corpses will be left on the ground, and the vultures are going to, go over the corpses. So you're going to see a lot of those companies that are going to go down will be opportunity for people, companies, corporate that have cash, backing, have strong equity and strong liquidity. So now you may not know them now because the rent is still on. It's after the rent that you know where how the flood will be. So today, people, corporate that have strong liquidity, and strong equity are waiting, looking out. You're going to see, like Mr. Bismarck said earlier, you're going to see consultations. Consolidation is a good way of saying people are going to acquire, companies are going to be acquired. And so people are going to be waiting to see companies that are going to suffer the most impact. Like I think we know them now, but what's important is if you're an investor, keep your war chest, keep scanning over the environment. As corporates are struggling, you should be preparing your pitches. I believe that we are going to see consolidation. That means
okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Nwuke. You spoke like a capitalist. I was just listening to a clip the other day, about a young investment banker, trader at Wall Street, who was being interviewed in the US. So he was saying something like that, people like him have been waiting for this opportunity. So he sees this, pandemic and then the collapse of global economy as an opportunity for him to really make a kill. So, but, looking at it, that's a very dangerous way of thinking, of looking at, being like a vulture looking to scavenge. And that's the impression of the capitalists. And Professor Wallaby was advising us against that, because if we keep with that kind of mindset, COVID-19 will not be the last. We will have a repeat. And that's what Professor Wallaby was advising us against. Now, there is something, I made a presentation to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industries the other day over Zoom. That was 2 weeks ago, on response to COVID-19. What I recommended is kind of a negotiated solution. Now, what I see happening right now is what the paradox of thrift. Those who follow Keynesian economics, we know the paradox of everybody is now holding, okay, let's save for the rainy day. Now the rain is on, nobody wants to spend. But now in the past, if we had this kind of situation in a recession, government needs to step in, spend the way out of recession. That is the mantra that Bismarck always talked about. Okay, but we have an issue here. Government itself is incapacitated because they have to fight the war, the health war, try to contain the spread, and also, find a way to offer palliative for the lockdown. So government itself is overstretched. The market has also collapsed. So we cannot leave the market to sort anything out. Neither can we leave it to the government to sort anything out, because right now government doesn't have capacity. So that is why I like what is happening in the Lagos State government, calling employers, to the table. So I am of the opinion that the only way out for everyone is to have something like a negotiated solution, okay? So of course, if companies are losing money, the next thing is to cut jobs, to lay off workers. But is that a solution? Because in the first wave, workers will lose their jobs. But in the second wave, because the workers who have lost their jobs have also lost the purchasing power to buy. So they will no longer be consuming the products coming from those companies. So the next wave will be the companies now going into bankruptcy and all of that. So eventually everybody will be out. So should we allow that to happen? Isn't there a possibility of having everybody on the table, let the banks put some moratorium on their loans by SMEs, let them not pay for now. So let's see, is it possible to renegotiate salaries so that people can have something going? Because if it is using the market principles or waiting for companies that will fail so that we buy them over, nothing will happen. Because in the last global financial meltdown in the United States, what we saw was America stepping in with bailouts. Now, the government doesn't have that capacity for bailouts, especially in our own case. So what is the way out, if not by negotiation? So ladies and gentlemen, that is the much that we can take. We thank you all for participating. It's been a very interactive and educative and very insightful webinar. The next one is on supply chain. I think it's tomorrow also. We have about 8 conversations during this COVID. So each day we'll be having one. So for the one tomorrow is on supply chain. One of the things that happened during this COVID-19 is also disruption in supply chain network all over the world. So our experts, Frank Ojadi and the rest of them will be leading that discussion tomorrow. Please tune in. Thank you very much. And please stay safe and stay sound. Thank you.
Thank you.